Hello, everyone, and welcome to Adventus Mining's live event. I'm pleased to introduce their CEO, Christian Kargl-Simard, and the El Domo Project General and Construction Manager, Skott Mealer. Christian and Scott will take us through a presentation and will be accepting questions afterwards. As a reminder, you can submit your questions on the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen at any point during the presentation. If there are any questions we don't have time for today, the team will reach out quickly afterwards to address them personally. As always, the summit is being recorded and will be available to watch at 6.com. My apologies here. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Christian, to kick things off.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you for all that are online today or watching this recording and have interest in Adventus Mining. It's been a while since we've done a webinar on the company. Probably goes back to 2022. Main reason for this is we've been in a waiting period with our permits and the permitting process, and as well as the government backdrop in Ecuador. And pleased to announce this morning substantial progress on the socialization of our final ESIA permit for the project, which is giving us confidence for line of sight to the end of permitting, potential construction, and all the good stuff around that. For those that don't know Adventus is a public company listed on the Venture Exchange, ticker ADZN. We've been in existence for about 7 years, 6 years in Ecuador, and over these 6 years, we've been advancing the El Domo deposit from exploration stage through PEA, PFS, feasibility study, project financing, detailed engineering. We've hired the construction team, and now final permitting. And on the line today, as Kyle said, you'll hear from Skott Mealer, who will be overseeing the construction of the project and has been the GM of El Domo here for the last year and a half. So why are we excited about El Domo? El Domo is a copper gold project, but primarily copper. It's the highest grade undeveloped copper project in the world. And as a result of that attribute, it is the lowest capital cost intensity of copper projects globally. And all that is driven by this plus 5% copper equivalent grade and the fact it's open pit with a reasonable strip ratio. A feasibility study in December 2021 outlined 308 million NPV8 after tax using $3.50 copper, which resulted in all sustaining costs of about $1.26 per pound copper equivalent for the life of mine and an after-tax rate of return of 32%. We have announced $240 million of project financing facilities for the project between Wheaton Precious Metals, Trafigura, and our mining contractor Stracon, the majority of which is precious metal streaming. So we're streaming 50% of the gold and 75% of the silver. If you apply the stream to the DCF model, that IRR after tax more than doubles. Over the last 6+ years, we've raised north of $130 million Canadian in equity at an average price of just sub $1 Canadian per share. And despite all of our successes over these years and being the next copper project globally to enter into construction, we're sitting at an all-time low. We are heavily institutional and strategically owned, which we'll go through later. That has resulted in us being successful in the capital raisings over the years, and also will allow us to complete project financing and last equity piece in preferentially here over the next few months. We've been busy doing detailed engineering over the last 18 months. We're around 60% complete. We will be 100% complete detailed engineering on items such as civils, infrastructure, mine plan, etc. when we start construction in Q4 of this year. And exploration-wise, we have lots of exploration targets, but we're trading at about 0.15 times our net asset value. And so therefore, all of our capital is being spent on getting to a construction decision. We'll get to exploration when we re-rate or in production down the road. The best comps for this company are trading in the $500 million to $1 billion range. I'll give you a couple of them. Adriatic Metals on the base metals side in Bosnia. Yes, it's in construction, but similar size reserves and grade as a zinc silver project there, about 800 million market cap. Another one Beforan in pre-construction here in Canada, copper zinc. They're about 800 million market cap. Some gold producers of note to compare to. Our life of mine free cash flow from this project is very similar to Silvercrest Metals. Their market cap while in production here is close to $1 billion. So sitting here at a Canadian market cap of 50 million Canadian, there's significant opportunity to make money here on the story. Scott?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Maybe I'll start off by talking about the environmental licensing process. It's on the top for us and probably you as well. As Christian mentioned, we just completed the first phase of field activities for the environmental consultation. So a little bit of background. Our ESIA was approved. We received a technical approval from the Ministry of Environment here in May, so May of 2022. And we were expecting this socialization process to take place in the second half of last year. However, you may remember there was some periods of social unrest in Ecuador that diverted the government's attention and resources to that issue. And also the government was in the process of reforming the rules for carrying out this socialization based on some rulings from the Constitutional Court to ensure that the process complies with the Constitution, the 2008 Constitution. So they completed that. The president signed the decree in May of this year, which laid out the new procedure for carrying out this socialization in the field. And we started in June. I say we, really this step is the responsibility, the direct responsibility of the Ministry of Environment. They're the ones that carry out this socialization in the field. And so we just completed the 14-day informative phase of this process. So that's one of two phases. There are, because of the Constitutional Court ruling that required this new process, a new procedure to be developed, there are 147 projects in Ecuador that were waiting this decree so that they can do the socialization process. Only 4 of them were mining projects, so the rest of them were anything from petroleum to hospitals to roads to agricultural projects, any project that needs an environmental license. So out of those 147, there are currently 7 projects that are that have started this process since the president signed the decree in May, and we are one of them. A little bit on the process itself. The informative process that was just completed last Sunday consists of 14 days of information centers in the communities of direct and indirect area of influence, where the community members can receive information about technical information about the proposed project, the design, the environmental impacts, the mitigation, and also there are workshops and assemblies that take place. So that was a successful process. We had around 1,200 visits and participation to the different information centers and workshops and assemblies. And so that has now successfully completed. The next phase is the consultation phase. So currently the ministry is working on their internal reports related to the informative phase. And then in the second half, within the next 2 months, we expect the next and final phase, which will be the consultative phase. or the consultation phase, and that consists of assemblies in the direct area of impact of the project, where the ministry will pose the question to the community if they are in agreement or not with the granting of the environmental license for the El Domo project. A few important things to note: the vote is non-binding, and the ministry will take into account if there are technical objections or technical justifications that are valid. Those would be considered, but otherwise, it's a non-binding process. And then after that, within a month or two, we expect to have the license in hand. I guess just touching on some other things on the slide here. One advantage that we have here in Ecuador. Ecuador's made considerable investments in their hydropower infrastructure over the last 15 years, and currently about 90% of the electrical power in Ecuador is generated by hydroelectric power. So not only is there the benefit of that power generation not producing carbon, but also it's a very favorable cost for power. It's about 9.5 cents a kilowatt hour for regulated customers at our connection voltage. So that's what we expect to pay. So because of the hydropower, the carbon footprint of our operation is relatively low. And we're all aware of the energy transition and the need for copper for low carbon technology. So it's the right time for Ecuador and the right time for market for this project to be developed and to come into production. We are less than 200 kilometers away from the nearest port. There's actually two options that are relatively close to each other. One is the port of Guayaquil, and one is the Basorja port, also in the same area. As far as economic development, we are looking at around $600 million in investments, taxes, royalties during the life of mine. And obviously we have the multiplier effects of that. We have a good relationship with our communities of direct and indirect area of impact. And one of the really exciting things about being involved in a project like El Domo, we're in a country, Ecuador, where mining is relatively new. I'm sure you're aware that there are 2 operating industrial mines in Ecuador, both in the province of Zamora-Chinchipe, the Mirador project, and the Fruta del Norte project. So the mining industry, or the formal mining industry, is relatively new in Ecuador. Ecuador is already starting to see the benefits of that new mining industry. Last year, the exports of minerals were $2.8 billion, which is significant for the country and for a relatively small formal mining sector. So the government does see responsible mining as a path for future economic development for the country. And also these projects, we're in the Bolivar province, we're in the Las Naves canton. Bolivar is one of the most economically depressed provinces in Ecuador. And projects like El Domo bring direct jobs, and then also all of the indirect jobs and benefits that come with that. So we're excited about that. Our communities are excited about that. So we're looking forward to taking the next step.
So market capitalization currently in the 50 to 60 million Canadian range. When we look at this chart here, as I mentioned, we're at our all-time low. Go back to 2020, August of 2020, we raised $38 million via bought deal financing at $1.28 Canadian a share. The use of proceeds for that was primarily to complete the feasibility study on El Domo. We completed the feasibility study at end of 2021. In January of 2021, we announced our $240 million project financing package. with Wheaton and Trafigura. Conditions precedent being receipt of the final permits. We also did a $34 million Canadian bought deal at around 98 cents Canadian a share. We subsequently hired Skott to be our construction manager and started detailed engineering on the project. And the way I describe this performance here is a combination of liquidity crisis in the junior sector, with multiple institutions over this period of time having redemptions, closing shop, or just the market cap threshold, liquidity threshold changing for the investors, as well as Scott explained, this delay in the permits that occurred during the second half of 2022 with the protests in Ecuador. Our company has never been de-risked as much as it is today, and the importance of a copper project globally has never been as important as it is today. So for us to be sitting at an all-time low with all of this behind us makes no sense to me. And the milestones for the company are very clear over the next few months that should take us to start construction. Last week, we closed $9 million US of financings. $5 million US is a first draw on our $45 million credit facility with Trafigura. It was always envisioned that $5 million gets drawn to complete the pre-construction and the permitting activities. And repayment of that $5 million is not required anytime soon if we roll into the further draws of the $45 million credit facility over the next year. We also did a $4 million US convertible, unsecured convertible debenture with Altius. Some investors have expressed concern over the conversion into shares of 31 cents Canadian and or a royalty. This is a friendly convertible. Keep in mind, Altius was the founding shareholder of the company and is one of the largest shareholders of the company. But the intent of the $9 million US is to bridge the company to the end of this year for the completion of permitting, the start of construction, and the completion of project financing for the project. And that $4 million from Altius is really meant to be paid back through the project financing activities and never be converted. So in a worst case scenario, it may, but it's not the intent. And I would look at the $9 million US as bridge loan. This cash takes us to the end of the year with the most important milestones of the company ahead of it. Our tranche of $1.20 per share warrants has just expired or about to expire. These warrants are with Trafigura at around 45 cents Canadian. And we have equity research with kind of average net asset value per share of well over $1 Canadian. Shareholder-wise, with the loss of some institutions over the last 18 months, we're starting to pick up on the retail side of things, but between institutional and strategic investors, we're still around 2/3 of the company. And Wheaton and Altius have been the lead orders over the last while. Management and board, I'll just speak to myself. The majority of my net worth is tied to Adventus. I do not own a house. I rent because all my money, family's money, is in Adventus and a few other companies. So the success of Adventus is very much tied to this, to seeing this project through construction. And as you can imagine, with the permitting and final financing activities, we've been extremely busy over the last few months. Over to you, Scott.
Okay, so one of the big advantages that I think Adventus and Curipamba Mining and the El Domo project has here in Ecuador are partners. Featured here on this slide are two key partners. One is the Nobis Group. Nobis is one of Ecuador's largest private business conglomerates. They have interests in a number of sectors, tourism, agriculture. They built the Pasorja port. So they have been able to successfully navigate the business and political system here in Ecuador to build a very strong and successful business. So they are a key partner on helping us navigate the business world here in Ecuador. The other one that I think is very important, we have the Salazar Resources as a partner. The Salazars made the discovery of the El Domo project back in 2008, and their group has worked continuously in Las Naves for the last 15 years. And that deep understanding of the local culture, connections with the community, with key leaders in the community, is really critical to our navigating the local environment there, the local and regional environment. And we see that some other projects in Ecuador without that deep understanding and connection have had some struggles. So we think that's key to our success. We talk about our team. I'm not going to go through each one of the people on this slide, but I think what I'd like to point out is the execution team, members of the execution team that we have in place for El Domo. So Christian mentioned I joined the company in April of last year, returning to Ecuador. I worked in Ecuador from 2006 to 2013, first on the Mirador and then on the Fruta del Norte project, which, as I mentioned, are the two projects that are currently in production in Ecuador. Then I spent about 10 years with Kinross, working on projects in Chile and Brazil, in the US, and before coming back to Ecuador last year. Dustin Small is our Vice President of Projects. He's directly leading all of the engineering effort. Dustin and I actually worked together on a project in Ecuador. He was working for Hatch. I was working for Kinross on the La Coipa project in Ecuador. That's where we met. But also here in country, we have hired some key people to take us through the next phase. One is Adrian Bercour. He's our process metallurgist that's leading the process design. He has extensive experience with VMS deposits from his time at Neves Corvo. We have Kevin McConnell, who is a very experienced heavy earthworks civil engineer who has experience in mining projects. Lorena Hativa is our human resources manager. She was spent 12 years at the Mirador project. So she joined Mirador about the same phase that we currently are, and was with the project through the entire phase of construction, startup, and beginning of production. So she led the effort for all of the recruiting and training, the training of the local community to be able to participate in the project. So she brings lots of really good experience to our team. We have Bernarda Elizalde, who is, she's Ecuadorian, but spent most of her career outside of Ecuador. She's our ESG manager. Most recently, she was with Torex in a director role. And so it's interesting, when she graduated from university, she didn't find opportunities in Ecuador, and her career ended up taking her outside of Ecuador. And when the opportunity for this project presented itself, she was very excited about being able to come back to Ecuador, to her home country, and be able to contribute with the knowledge that she's gained over more than 25 years of experience in the industry. Fernando Arroyo is our site manager. He was the site manager for Fruta del Norte and has 35 years of experience in, he's a civil and geotechnical engineer, has 35 years of experience in construction in Ecuador, including his participation in the FDN project. Our legal manager, Andrea Belseca, is one of the most experienced mining lawyers in Ecuador. She saw this process from the other side. She worked in the Ministry of Energy and Mines during the time when Mirador and Fruta del Norte were moving through their permitting and pre-production phase and into construction. And also we're working with KCB, who's our engineer of record. They will be on site to do field engineering and QA/QC during the construction of the tailings dam and other site infrastructure. Obviously, KCB is a known, respected name, and they also participated in Fruta del Norte and Mirador. We have SLR working on our mine design and planning, and we've signed an alliance contract with Stratcon Ripconceave. So Stratcon is a contract mining company out of Peru, and Ripconceave is their local JV partner. Stratcon in particular has extensive experience in Guyana and Colombia. Well, they're from Peru, so they do obviously a lot of work in Peru, but they also have several experiences going into jurisdictions similar to what we have, where it's a rural area, not a lot of mining experience, and being able to act not only technically competently, but also in the social and community arena, and provide training and incorporate the local community into the process. And with them, they're helping us with all of the constructability, the detailed planning for sequencing for the mine construction and the tailings dam construction. And also in conjunction with them, we have already started maintainer and operator training, which are all people from the local community who are going through these training programs to be able to participate with good jobs in the mine once we get going.
So all that said, we are ready to start construction. We have, in parallel with permitting, been spending significant money to expand the team, complete detail engineering, so we're in the best position possible to de-risk construction. And that costs money. That's $1 to $2 million US a month, depending on activities per month since the beginning of 2022. So this is a high-grade copper VMS, volcanic massive sulfide deposit. If you look at the majority of the large cap to major diversified mining companies in the world, they all started on a high-grade VMS, copper VMS. Why? Because these are very high margin and doable as a single asset developer to finance and get into production. So this would be exactly that type of example. And the free cash flow that this project generates on an annual basis is substantial. On an annual basis, multiples of where we're currently trading in the market. First 10 years of mine life is open pit. You're looking at a reserve of 6.5 million tons at 1.9% copper, 2.5% zinc, 2.5 grams gold, and 1.5 ounces silver. Just in the gold grade, that would be a nice open pit gold mine at 2.5 grams gold with a 6-to-1 strip. But you've got all the other metals which we recover into 3 concentrates. Then we have around 3 million tons in underground mineable resources that are in the mine plan between years 10 to 15, so approximately a 15-year mine life. We are copper dominant as a metal revenue driver. You're looking at approximately 25,000 tons per annum of copper equivalent production over life of mine, very low cost. It's all about free cash flow. You're starting year one at 7% copper equivalent open pit. Our philosophy on advancing this project is to get into production as quickly as possible and as simply as possible. So no new technologies, everything off the shelf, and maximizing rate of return rather than NPV to start production. And then through the free cash flow, we can add through expansions of the mill, accelerating the underground development, investing in exploration, etc. So we have a pretty easy path to add an additional 100 million of NPV after tax, in addition to the $308 million NPV base case from the feasibility study, without making any new discoveries. Scott?
Okay, so looking a little bit on the execution plan, execution timeline. So the engineering is currently, as Christian mentioned, 60% complete. If we break that down by component, we're about 85% complete on the tailings and waste rock facilities, which is being done by KCB. The mine planning is around 95%, which is being handled by SLR. The process plant is around 35%, and that's being handled by DRA. And I'll just take advantage to answer one of the questions about the packages. The reason we're at 35% on the process plant is we are waiting for the environmental license to place the order for the long lead equipment items, and obviously we need the vendor engineering to advance the overall design of the process plant. And then the balance of infrastructure is about a 70%, which is also being handled by DRA. We are in the process of updating our CapEx estimate. We've had some, as is typical, we've had some ups and downs on this, some savings, and also some other things that have been higher costs. So we're working through that process to get to the final control budget. We're looking for a construction decision post environmental license in Q4 of this year. And the construction is expected to take 22 months with first concentrate in mid-2025 and full production by Q4 of 2025.
A couple other things to point out here. We did sign right before the end of last year an investment protection agreement with the government of Ecuador. This is the third such an agreement for an exploitation stage project, and that protects our historical and future investment in the country. So it is a backstop. We have spent $84 million US on advancing this project to date. Our current market cap is around 40 million US. So you could read through, we're more than covered in terms of our market cap by that investment protection agreement. The other important thing here is the strategic investment consideration. We have $240 million of project financing as mentioned, but that is not all the capital we need to get to commercial production. Focus of myself in particular since February of this year has been looking at all options to fund the last chunk of money in so that we can start construction, as Scott said, in the fourth quarter of this year. We completed, we had multiple interested groups covering different part of the cap structure. We've completed multiple site visits with various groups. It is very competitive. We are honing in on a final transactions to fully fund us over the next few months in parallel with the ESIA. So I'm quite confident you will see a fully financed project in the short term. We've got good exploration within the district, but as mentioned, our focus with our current valuation and our treasury is advancing El Domo to production. We did make a new VMS discovery 4.5 kilometers to the southwest of El Domo a few years ago. The district is well connected with roads. To put in perspective, every additional 1 million tons at 5% copper equivalent adds about 80 million NPV8 after tax to the overall economics. So very, very material. We have porphyry exploration projects I think many of the people on the call today are excited about the Santiago project. So am I. I think it's one of the best porphyry exploration projects on the planet. Both of these projects are permitted for drilling. They are drill ready. We do not have funds to drill them. We're holding them on the basis of $10,000 a month care and maintenance until we have further funds. And specifically on Santiago, it is a more challenging area of Ecuador to operate in. And the government has requested us to wait to drill there until post-elections at the end of this year. So to conclude, we are sitting on the most advanced undeveloped greenfields copper project globally. It happens to be the highest grade, the strongest economics. We have project financing in place. We're nearing completion of permitting. We have our construction team in place. We expect to be in production mid-2025 when the expectations are copper to be substantially higher in terms of price. And we're trading at our all-time low at around 0.15 times net asset value. This doesn't exist elsewhere in the mining sector for copper projects. We have significant optionality in terms of exploration, but we're trying to maximize efficiencies with our cap structure right now. And we built a business in Ecuador that is all Ecuadorian. Skott doesn't look like he's Ecuadorian, but he is Ecuadorian by way of being born or being married to an Ecuadorian. So all Ecuadorian team with significant Ecuadorian stakeholders such as Novus and Salazar. And with that, I will end the presentation and open it up to questions.
Perfect. Thanks, Christian. And as a reminder, everyone, there have been a lot of questions submitted in the chat, but feel free to continue to submit questions in the right-hand side of your screen. I'll prompt the question. You two gentlemen decide who's best to answer. I won't direct them to you, except for we did have a submitted question, a pre-submitted question that I will direct towards Skott. Skott, how confident are you in executing on construction of this project?
I think we have a extremely talented team, both in-house and the consultants that we have retained to work on design and the construction team that we're putting together to move this into construction. I feel very confident on the execution of this project. We have examples in Ecuador now of both a project that's much larger than ours, the Mirador project, and the underground mine, Fruta del Norte, that are in topographic and climatic conditions that are similar to ours. And they were successful in completing those projects and putting them into production. And we feel we've got a great team in place. We've got a good design and very confident on the execution of the project.
Thank you. And the reason I asked that question first is because I'm going to address Chris's in the audience here, with the two main counter oppositions being, one, the perceived harm to watershed aquifers around El Domo, and two, the opposition to an open pit.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier this informative environmental consultation phase that we just completed. The main purpose of that phase, or the main purpose of the environmental consultation, is to ensure that the communities in the direct and indirect area of impact have a understanding of what the project looks like, what the environmental impacts are, and what the environmental management plan is. We had, as I mentioned, over 1,200 visits to the different information centers and workshops and assemblies, where there was detailed and extensive dialogue and discussion around water, around the open pit, and for the most part, the questions were answered with the support of the technical information available from the mine, and people generally were satisfied with the answers. What we found really in this process is that people obviously and as to be expected have concerns about the environmental impacts and the management plan of the mine. And that was the first topic of discussion. And then things quickly moved to things like local benefits and the royalties and what economic benefit it's going to bring to themselves. So I think the express purpose of, and also the company has been in the community for 15 years, and part of our routine activities is socializing and educating the local community about our mine and about mining in general. That the culmination of that is this information process as part of the environmental consultation.
Thank you. And excuse me, my apologies if this is a repeat of the question, but I do want to address it because I'm not familiar with this anti-mining group. But Mark posed this question: can you address the concerns raised by CONAIE, CONAIE, and other anti-mining groups in the press conference in Las Neves last Friday, July 21st?
Sure. There are groups, this is not unique to Ecuador. There are groups around the world that have ideology that's anti-extraction industry. So that includes mining, petroleum, and others. They're very good at advancing their messages in social media and in media in general. I think the correct response to that is that we've just successfully completed this process, 14 days in the field, 1,200 visits. The people who live in and around Las Neves showed very strong support for this process. First for the process, for their constitutional right to be informed, and then also for the projects and the benefits that it brings. So I think probably everyone on the call is aware that we have to take declarations made by groups that are a strong ideological position with a grain of salt. And I think the proof is the successful completion of this process that we've just completed.
Thank you. And Christian, I believe it was the Santiago project. You mentioned that it's a little trickier to drill there. They said wait until the upcoming elections. And Jim posed this question: do you expect any delays in the project permitting timeline associated with the upcoming election, given all your projects in Ecuador?
Well, I think there might be two questions in that. Maybe the first question is surrounding the permitting timeline for El Domo with regard to the elections. Maybe I'll get Skott to answer that one.
Yeah, so I think the situation that we're currently in, the environmental ministry, I mentioned that there are 147 projects that are in the queue, and only a few of those are mining. There's 147 projects that are in the queue to go through this socialization process, this environmental consultation process. And we're one of 5. I misspoke earlier. I said 7. There are 5 projects that are in this process. And we're one of those 5. The mission of the environmental ministry is to finish this process in the current administration. And they're working diligently to do that. As I mentioned, this process is their responsibility and being led by them. That's their mission, to finish this in this current administration. So to date, they have complied with all of the dates that they have laid out for the different major steps and minor steps in this process. So we're feeling pretty confident. We're more than 60% of the way through this process, and now a lot of the steps are internal to the ministry that they're working on, with this one additional assembly that'll take place within the next couple of months. So we are feeling pretty good about the license.
On the Santiago exploration project, The opposition has challenged us twice in lower level courts, try to make a case that there's an environmental protection zone or something to the like. They have failed to show any proof that this is a protected area or there's endangered species or anything like that. And so we've won both those cases. That said, it is a politically and socially charged project, and we in the government believe it's prudent to put that project on pause until the election process is over.
Thank you. And Jim had a follow-up question here. Has the company been in discussions with the presidential candidates? And to follow up with that, does the company support any politicians with campaign contributions?
To Scott.
Sure. As a general rule, I think for us and probably all over the world, it's not very good strategy to support political candidates because you have to have a crystal ball to figure out who's going to win. So we don't support any political candidates, and that's part of our. And we report that in the as part of our annual reporting in our transparency policies that we do not participate in supporting political candidates. Also, in this case, we have not had discussions with any of the current political candidates.
Thank you for that. Just trying to figure out what's the best question to keep the conversation fluid here. I'll ask Steffens here. Could you comment on press articles regarding violent protests against the project in Las Neves Canton and how well these protests are supported, rejected by the overall sentiment in the region surrounding the project?
Sure. I think I partially answered that question before. We do know that there are groups that are ideologically opposed to mining and other types of extractive projects or other types of projects in general. They tend to sensationalize their reporting. That's part of their strategy. We had very strong community support with even letters being written from members of the community that had over 600 signatures that were requesting the mayor and the government to ensure continuity in this process. So the support base for the people who are in the area of influence of the project is very strong. And as in other jurisdictions, there are people who seek to derail projects like ours and other projects.
Thank you. And Ken has this question. Could you please advise the chronology of events from environmental permit, exploitation permit, and to the start of construction? The press release today was a lot to digest.
I'll tackle that one. So as Scott mentioned, we received the technical approval of the ESIA in May of 2022. We waited for the presidential decree to get signed in May of this year to allow us to start the final socialization phase that started in June. As Scott said, we're on 60% through that process. So you can read through to when we potentially could have a resolution to the socialization process and the granting of the ESIA. We're a medium-scale project, not a large-scale project like some others in Ecuador. Solgo, for example, just announced an MOU with regards to their exploitation agreement terms. A medium-scale project does not require an exploitation agreement nor advanced royalties, but there is still a component of exploitation terms that we need to agree to with the government, which will be completed in tandem with the ESIA approval. We expect to have an announcement on that shortly.
Thank you. And there's been a couple of questions about the finance, and I'm wondering, is that one of the main factors that's contributing to the low value of your share price? Maybe you can touch on that.
Yeah, it's definitely a catch-22. I think if we had a fully permitted project next week, I don't foresee the share price doubling. even though even that would be cheap, I do think there is this sense of a major equity financing coming for the company at a substantial discount, and that's what everyone's waiting for to pile into the story. My average ownership price is multiples of where it is today, and most of the institutional ownership price is around 90 cents a share. So the goal is to try to limit the dilution, equity dilution here to our shareholders. And there are many ways to do that, whether we increase the size of the stream, we add additional project debt financing, unsecured debt financing, sell part of the project to a strategic group more on a NAV basis than a market basis. Could be mergers with other companies. It could be a sale of the company or combinations of the above. But you need to trust us that what we're solving for is to maximize shareholder value here.
Perfect. Thank you, Christian and Scott, for taking us through this presentation. I believe we answered all the questions in the Q&A without trying to avoid repetitiveness. Just as a reminder, though, that this recording will be available at 6.com in the coming days if you ended up coming in a little late. You can also find more information about Adventus Mining at their website at adventusmining.com. I'll hand it back to you, Christian, though, for any final words before we close off.
Thank you again for participating in this webinar and showing the interest. We've gone through a very interesting time in Ecuador, both politically and in terms of the navigating the permitting route. There's no question, based on the quality of our shareholder base, our project financiers, and the amount of money we've raised, that this is an excellent project that will generate a lot of free cash flow. And we're now in this critical time where we're completing the permitting and the final project financing. And with that behind us, potentially in the next few months, this stock could re-rate substantially. So I would recommend here in the next while that this may be a good time to take initial position, double down, or try to get others interested as well.